actually thought I'd start with a Nelson Mandela quote. There is no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. So if we start with that, and then we look at some of the statistics on how we're treating children. 1 in 10 children in the UK have a diagnosable mental health disorder. 1 in 3 children is obese. 80,000 children are being diagnosed with depression. That includes 8,000 children under 10. We have the highest number of 10 to 12-year-olds who are worried about body image. We have the most unhappy children in the world, according to the Good Childhood Report, the most unhappy children with school. The statistics are just extraordinary. If you actually look at that, I was thinking about Christine talking about exam factory. If this was a factory floor and you had these kind of statistics coming out of any kind of production line, you would stop the production line, you would bring in your entire management team, and you would say, what the hell is going on? And that, I truly believe, this is the state that we've actually reached. Now, I'm the chief exec of the Safe Childhood movement. The movement was it's still a young movement. We were established 2.5 years ago. And it really was the result of, I mean, I've been writing and talking about this for like 20 years, but I think things have reached such a point, certainly in England, particularly England, I mean the UK is bad, but England particularly bad, in the lack of focus on the best interest of the child. And we believe, as a movement, we believe that young children are citizens, and they have developmental rights. It's not just human rights in the way we talk about it, but we're arguing that young children have biological and developmental rights to not have their innate love of learning and natural potential corroded and compromised by adult creative systems. So we've reached an extraordinary point of time where the pressures on children in the modern world are so extraordinary. So the movement is not just looking at the education system. We are actually bringing people together from across the board, actually. We've got now 40 global advisors, some of the top people in the world, but looking at commercialisation, sexualisation, the impact of the digital world, the lack of contact with nature, risk-averse societies. It's a strange world our children are living in. But we have actually prioritised early years simply because we felt there was damage going on there with some of the current policy making that was so detrimental to the way that our children were growing up, that we actually had to make that one of our first priorities. So we have a very, very strong early years team. We actually launched within 6 months of starting, not even that, of launching the movement, we launched the Too Much Too Soon campaign, which went national, and it also went international. And that's really saying, where is the justification for this? We're supposed to have evidence-led policy making. Well, we don't see the evidence. We have 90% of countries in the world where the children do not start formal learning, not necessarily school, formal learning until they're 6 or 7. Very good reason for that, because the longer they can spend in, they're called play-based environments, but we've even diminished the word play in England. Play is not just sand trays and something that has a diminished value. Play is where you learn self-regulation, it's executive functioning, it's an extraordinarily important part, not just for children, but for adults too. It's how we problem solve and see challenges and think out of the box, not in the box. So the reason that it's important for young children to stay for 6 or 7 years in that play-based environment is because it gives them the time to develop all their innate capacities, their neurological capacities, their physiological capacities. And if we put them into environments too early, too soon, it's not that they won't achieve what we want them to do, but we may be compromising some of the things that actually make them joyful, happy, fulfilled learners later on. So we might pressurise a 4 or 5-year-old to read, and actually developmentally they're not ready. But if you push them to do it, and you tell them that the only reason they're going to get love and value is by doing it, they'll doing it. But when they're 14 or 15, the last thing they're going to want to do is read. And there's evidence that's showing that these are the kind of impact we're having. We're eroding the learning dispositions, the actual love of learning. I mean, we have politicians and Ofsted talking about, some of the language that used is very revealing. I know Nick Hudson from Ofsted before, he's resigned now, but he was saying that even 2-year-olds are ready to learn. It's extraordinary language when children are learning from pre-birth. It's the most dynamic period of learning ever. And yet we have language that says, oh, children are ready to learn when they get to school. Well, no, they've been learning at a phenomenal rate. Actually, what we do in a lot of situations, when we take them into reception classes and into formal learning environments, if we're not careful, we actually stem their learning. And one of the reasons I got so passionate about this was I was actually a management consultant before I got involved in this, and I had my daughter. And purely by chance, I thought, well, I'll go and have a look at, I actually looked at a Montessori school, but I was gobsmacked by what, nobody told me that children were capable. They were doing things that were way beyond what the curriculum said they should be capable of doing. So I actually think we're not only putting developmentally pressures on children, we're actually stopping them doing what they're capable of doing. So it's a really, really serious situation. Now, with early years policy making, as I say, we launched the Too Much Too Soon campaign. So there are a number of objectives. You can go online, toomuchtoosoon.org. We launched with an open letter. Some of you may remember from the press, 127 really eminent people and experts saying we need to look at this. And I was naive enough to think at the time that this would be taken seriously by the politicians. And actually we were labelled as the blob, and it was quite extraordinary, really. In fact, it's got us much more media coverage than we would have had. But actually, I thought that was an appalling indictment of the system. So I could go on for hours. What I do want to share with you, because we have had baseline assessment introduced this month into primary schools. And baseline assessment is every child going into reception school from nursery now is going to be assessed within 6 weeks of starting school at this very, very crucial time of moving from nursery into reception. And this is an email I got yesterday from a mother. I'm so happy to have found your organisation. At the moment, I'm absolutely devastated about what my 4-year-old son's school is doing to him. Henry, my 4-year-old, is one of the most determined, resourceful and imaginative children I know. He runs rings around his 7-year-old brother, and he runs rings around us too. He's an active physical learner who's inquisitive, always exploring and investigating. He takes things apart with a screwdriver to see how they work, and yes, he can put them together again. Henry can count and recognise his numbers. He can't recognise his letters aside from an H, and he has speech difficulties. He can only write an H. This week, he was baseline tested by his school. He was given a number, a rank, a group, and he was placed in orange, which is the bottom of 5. Because Henry can't write his name or recognise and pronounce his sounds correctly, we've been given the impression that he's likely to be a low achiever throughout his remaining school days. This, we are told, will be likely to be borne out in his SATs at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. He may well probably also fail his GCSEs. So far, Henry's attended a private nursery for almost 3 years, from the age of 2 to 4 3/4. At nursery, Henry excelled, achieved, overachieved, and surpassed all his targets at EYFS. He wasn't taught to write his name because he wasn't interested. He was too busy designing pirate ships and working out which material would be best suited for the sails. I visited Henry's nursery this morning. They're appalled. I'm just getting to grips with this campaign and will do more reading over the next few days. I am just a parent, and I don't have a background in teaching or education, yet every single fibre of my being knows these tests are wrong. I know this has harmed my son. I know, and forgive me if I'm being overdramatic, but I would go so far as to say, this is wicked. I'll be happy to help in every way I can. That's what we're looking at.